There are stories we stumble into by accident, and then there are stories that choose us. This one? It started with a girl and a storm. Not the kind that howls through trees or floods city streets. No, this was the kind of storm that breaks quietly, through hospital bills, final eviction notices, and loneliness so thick you can hear your own heart echo. She wasn't looking for love, or luck, or even hope. And yet, in the stillness of a dusty bookstore corner, where paperbacks whispered forgotten dreams, and the radiator groaned like it was tired of surviving too, a billionaire appeared. Not the kind from fairy tales, polished and smiling. No, this one was colder than marble, and lonelier than the moon. And what he asked her wasn't a proposal. It was a contract. 7 days. Pretend to be my wife. Smile for the cameras. Fool the world. What happened next? It was supposed to be fiction. But the heart doesn't follow scripts. You won't believe what unfolded when a bookstore clerk with nothing left to lose met a man who had everything, except the one thing he never dared ask for. So, stay close, because this story doesn't end where you think it will. Don't forget to subscribe to John's Stories channel for more dramatic tales that will break your heart and heal it in the same breath.
I always thought rock bottom would be louder, but that morning, before my whole life changed, it was quiet. The old radiator hissed like it was trying to warm more than just the room, and the bookstore smelled of yellowed pages and broken spines. I used to love that smell. Now it just reminded me that everything in here was secondhand, including me. My name is Emily Harper, 26, 2 part-time jobs, 1 mother in the hospital, 0 backup plans. I was shelving romance novels someone had carelessly knocked over, my fingers numb from the cold, when I heard the doorbell chime. Not the sharp ding of excitement, just a soft, tired chime, like even the bell didn't expect anything good today. An old man hobbled in, shoulders hunched under a coat 3 sizes too big. His shoes were soaked, and he looked like he'd walked straight out of a Dickens novel. I didn't think. I just moved. "Sir, would you like to sit down? I can get you something warm." He gave me a tired nod, and I helped him to the chair by the window, pulled a wool scarf from the lost and found bin, found an unopened bottle of water in my bag, placed a dog-eared copy of Steinbeck's The Winter of Our Discontent in his lap. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because, I don't know, maybe because I know what it feels like to need something. Anything. Kind. What I didn't know was that someone was watching. He stood behind the history shelves, tall, still, eyes like burnished amber, catching the gray morning light. Later, I'd learn his name was Alexander Reed. Yes, that Alexander Reed, the CEO of Reed Global Media. Net worth $2 billion. Heart? Rumored to be non-existent. But in that moment, he was just a man staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. When he finally stepped forward, his voice was so calm it startled me. "Do you often help strangers like that?" I turned. "I didn't see you come in." "You didn't answer my question." "I guess I didn't think about it." "Well, I did." And just like that, the storm walked in. Later, when I'd replay that moment 100 times in my mind, I'd realize it didn't feel real even then. He slid a sleek black card across the counter, his name embossed in silver. "I have a proposition for you." I laughed, nervous, dry. "What is this, a hidden camera show?" He shook his head. "No cameras, no tricks. I need someone to play a role. For 1 week, my wife. Publicly, for business reasons. There's no fine print. Just 7 days of pretending." He said it like he was asking me to house sit, not upend my entire world. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just stared at the card as if it would explode if I touched it. Then he named the number. $50,000? For 7 days? I swear, I forgot how to breathe. My rent was overdue. My mother's next surgery deposit was 3 weeks away. My phone screen was cracked. My life, essentially, was a collapsing card tower held together with cheap coffee and hope. He must have seen the war behind my eyes because he softened just slightly. "Come to this address at 8 a.m. tomorrow. If you show up, I'll take that as a yes. If not, well, we'll never speak again." He turned to go, then stopped, looked back. "Emily." I froze. He never told me my name. He pointed to my name tag and smiled faintly. "You're not invisible, even if the world has tried to make you feel that way." That night, I stared at the 2 business cards he left like they were magic spells with consequences I couldn't foresee. I thought about walking away, about how dangerous it was to step into someone else's world, especially a world made of glass and gold. But mostly, I thought about my mother. And at 7:15 the next morning, I stood outside the gates of the Reed estate, my thrift store coat wrapped tight around me, clutching a suitcase older than I was. The man who greeted me looked like he belonged in a BBC drama. Polished, poised, gray at the temples, introduced himself as Henry, the estate's butler. He said, "Miss Harper," as if I were royalty. Inside was another universe. Walls paneled in mahogany, a chandelier I didn't dare look directly at, a music room with a silent grand piano that probably cost more than my entire existence. In the study, Alexander was waiting. He said, "You came," simply, like it was inevitable. I said, "I thought I'd say no." He said, "So did I." And then training began. Not just how to hold a wine glass or walk in heels, how to become someone I'd never been. A poised, elegant, jet-set woman who knew which fork to use, what vintage to praise, how to walk into a room as if it belonged to her. Celeste Fontaine, his image consultant, French, terrifying, dressed head to toe in Chanel, sized me up like I was a broken sculpture. She said, circling me. "You'll do. You have the eyes. That's important. The eyes must lie." But the eyes? Mine never learned how. And that became a problem. Because Alexander was watching. Always watching. Not with lust. Not even curiosity. Something else. Something I couldn't name then. And every time our hands brushed, every time I caught him looking at me for a beat too long, I felt it. The boundary blur. The fiction flicker. Have you ever had a moment where pretending led to something unexpectedly real? Please comment below and like this video if you believe the best love stories start with honesty. Subscribe our channel now for more powerful story-based videos every day.
Henry appeared at exactly 7:50 p.m., like clockwork. "Your car is waiting, Miss Harper," he said. But when I turned around and looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize myself. The girl reflected back wasn't the one who survived on instant noodles and secondhand sweaters. She was wearing an ivory satin gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her lips were wine dark, her hair a cascade of soft curls, her eyes lined to perfection. But it wasn't the makeup that shocked me. It was the way I was standing, like I belonged. Somewhere deep down, I didn't believe it. But tonight, I'd fake it harder than I'd ever faked anything in my life. The charity gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum, an architectural palace wrapped in power, legacy, and expectations. The red carpet alone felt like walking across a minefield of stares and whispers. The doors to the ballroom opened slowly. Alexander was waiting at the base of the stairs. And when he looked up and saw me, he froze. Completely. His phone slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. It wasn't just surprise in his expression. It was something else. Like something sacred had entered the room and he was afraid to touch it. "God," he whispered, voice hoarse. For a second, neither of us moved. Neither of us breathed. I descended the staircase slowly, each step measured, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "Is the plan still intact?" I asked, trying to stay in character. But his eyes didn't leave me. He stepped forward and just said softly, "Smile slightly, and look at me like I'm your entire world." "And how will you look at me?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he held out his hand. "You make me forget everything else." We stepped onto the red carpet, flanked by cameras, VIPs, and faceless socialites who knew how to destroy reputations with a whisper. But for a moment, none of it mattered, until she appeared. Her name was Veronica Blackwell, his ex, the one everyone still whispered about. She approached us like a slow-burning flame in a red designer gown that said danger without needing to say a word. Her voice dripped with condescension and memory. "What a surprise," she said with a practiced smile. "We never had quiet evenings when we were together. I'm shocked you're even capable." Alexander's jaw tightened. I felt his hand grip mine harder than before. And in that moment, I understood. She had hurt him badly. And I wasn't just playing pretend anymore. I was shielding him. I turned to her with a calm smile. Well, he doesn't like noise anymore. He prefers peace. The look in her eyes? Like a chess master realizing they'd just been outplayed. He leaned in. "May I dance with my wife?" We left her standing there as the orchestra began a soft Viennese waltz. He pulled me close, closer than we'd ever been. "You're perfect," he whispered. "Was it her?" I asked, eyes searching his. He paused, then quietly, "Yes." "And she broke you." He didn't answer, but his silence was the loudest confession I'd ever heard. We moved together across the floor like two people who danced through lifetimes, fluid, connected, aching with something unspoken. I know this is all pretend, but this feels real. It is real, and that's the problem. Why? Because in 6 days, you'll leave, and I'll go back to being the man I was before, cold, alone. My heart splintered right there. And what if I don't want to leave? What if I want more? His voice cracked. Then everything changes, forever. We didn't talk much after the dance, not in words. But later that night, when I slipped out into the Carter Estate's back garden to escape the noise, the pressure, the weight of my own heartbeat, I found him. Not in a suit, not in character, just a man. His jacket gone, tie undone, hair slightly tousled from his fingers. He didn't say anything. I didn't either. I didn't have to. I sat on the stone bench beneath the glowing magnolias. My eyes welled up without warning. Tears I didn't know I'd held back came rushing like a storm, dam breaking. "I'm not crying," I whispered, as if saying it would make it true. He stepped closer. "Emily, don't," I said. "Just let me sit here and pretend this is normal, that people like us can exist in the same world. You think this is easy for me, to pretend? When I saw that man tonight talking to you, when he called you irresistible, I wanted to rip him apart." I looked up, startled. "I forgot this was fake the moment you walked down those stairs. I forgot why I started all this." "Then why are you still pretending?" He hesitated. "Because if I stop, I have to admit I want more, and I don't know how to want someone without destroying everything." I reached for his hand, and he pulled me in. He kissed me, slow, careful, terrified. But as soon as I kissed him back, it changed. It became hungry, real, desperate in the way people who've been alone too long learn to hold on when something finally feels right. I woke up the next morning in the guest suite, alone, but not lonely. I sat by the window in his oversized shirt, sipping coffee and staring at the sunlight dripping over the marble floor. My lips still tingled from the night before. And for the first time in years, I felt wanted. Not useful, not convenient. Wanted. But then the knock came. And so did she. "Veronica, I just wanted a word," she said, voice like a knife wrapped in velvet. "I'm busy." She smiled. 5 years. That's how long we were together. I know him better than anyone. He's incapable of love. I closed the book I was pretending to read. "Then why are you here?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Because you're not part of this world. You're a charity case he needed for PR. I was the real thing." "I don't care. You're the past. I'm the one he kissed last night." She flinched, and I knew I'd won the battle. But not the war. Because that afternoon, I packed. Every scar I'd ever carried screamed at me, "Run now, before it hurts." I walked out the front door with my old suitcase and didn't look back. The train station was cold, the kind of cold that gets into your bones and stays there. I stood in line, ticket in hand. My fingers trembled. Not from the weather, from the ache in my chest. And then I heard it. "Emily." I turned. Alexander was running down the platform like a man possessed. His tie flapped, his coat flew open, his eyes, those amber eyes, searched until they locked onto mine. "You can't leave," he said, breathless. "You can't." "Why not?" "Because you're not a role anymore. You're the only real thing in a life full of performances." I swallowed hard. "Then stop treating me like I'm replaceable." He stepped closer. "I'm trying, Emily. I'm trying to be the man you see when you look at me." "Then say it." "I love you." He didn't hesitate. "I love you," he repeated, voice cracking. "I don't want you because you're perfect. I want you because you make me want to be better." I dropped my ticket, and I walked straight into his arms. The next morning, we didn't wake up to news cameras or legal contracts. We made pancakes in a messy kitchen, argued over syrup, laughed until my stomach hurt. For once, no one was pretending. And somehow, in a world that once felt so cold, we were home.
The days that followed didn't feel like a fairy tale. They felt like real life, unexpected, messy, beautiful. We still had awkward silences. I still burned the toast. He still worked too late and forgot to call. But there were no more roles. We walked in the rain without umbrellas, laughing as puddles soaked our shoes. We sat in quiet rooms and read in parallel, sharing glances when a line in a book struck too close to home.
We stayed in bed on Sunday mornings, tangled in limbs and stories we'd never told anyone else before. There was a night, just past midnight, when I caught him staring at me across the candlelit kitchen. He had that look again, the one he'd worn the night we met. But this time, it wasn't confusion in his eyes. It was clarity. "You know," he said, holding an old mason jar of tea like it was fragile crystal, "I used to think love was something that happened in movies, something people like me didn't get. And now? Now I know it's not about magic or fireworks. It's about choosing the same person every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He reached for my hand across the table, just held it. No fireworks, just warmth. "Do you think love can really grow in just 7 days?" I asked softly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he brushed his thumb across my knuckles, and when he finally spoke, it wasn't a grand declaration, it was a whisper full of weight. "With you," he said, "it only took one." A week later, we were back in the ballroom. Another gala, more cameras, more eyes, but I wasn't nervous anymore. I wasn't the fake wife. I was me, in a fiery red gown, chin lifted, heart steady. As we stepped onto the marble floor, Veronica approached again, this time like a storm cloud without lightning. Her voice syrupy sweet. "So we meet again. I hear you're no longer just the contract." This time I didn't flinch. "This time," I said evenly, "I'm here as myself." Alexander stepped beside me, cool but firm. "Let it go, Veronica." She smirked. "I just wonder, who do you think you are, thinking you can keep a man like him?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because just then the music stopped, the chandeliers dimmed, and Alexander stepped away from me onto the stage. No script, no cue cards, just him, unfiltered. He took the microphone and the room fell into a hush. I used to believe, he began, voice low but steady, that someone like me wasn't made for love, that my heart was built for numbers, not for beating. The crowd stirred. For years, he continued, I convinced myself that connection was a liability, that feelings were risks, that vulnerability was a weakness. He looked at me. And then she walked into my life. Every gaze turned toward me, but I didn't feel small. I felt seen. She didn't want my money, my legacy, my name. She just wanted the truth. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. And then he knelt. In a world full of noise, she became my silence. In a life full of mirrors, she became my reflection. No more contracts, no more pretending, just this. He opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. Nothing flashy, nothing cold, just sincere. Emily Harper, will you marry me? I don't remember walking up to him. I don't remember if I said yes right away or cried first. Maybe both. But I remember one thing, how it felt. Like coming home. Like every part of me that had been ignored, overlooked, dismissed, was finally chosen. He whispered against my forehead as he pulled me into a hug. We're going to be the happiest couple in the world. And this time, I believed him. A few months later, we didn't have a grand wedding. No paparazzi, no designer gowns, just a sunflower garden behind the estate, a lace dress I chose myself, and wildflowers I picked that morning. Henry cried quietly during the vows. Celeste brought an inappropriate amount of champagne. And Alexander? He shook so much while sliding the ring on my finger that I had to steady his hands. It was perfect. Not because it was extravagant, but because it was real. I want to tell you something I don't usually share. A few years ago, I knew a girl. Let's call her Sam. She was a cashier at a 24-hour pharmacy I used to go to at midnight for snacks I didn't need and melatonin I forgot to take. Every time I walked in, Sam greeted people like they mattered, like they weren't just transactions. One night, I asked her why she was so kind even when customers were rude or indifferent. She smiled and said, "Because you never know who's holding on by a thread. Sometimes a smile is the only thing that thread is attached to." She didn't know it, but that night, I was that person. Years later, I found out she'd gotten a scholarship, moved across the country, and started her own clinic. She didn't need to be famous. She just needed to be seen. That's what this story is about. Emily wasn't a perfect woman. Alexander wasn't a perfect man. But they saw each other, not as illusions or masks, but as souls. And they chose each other, again and again and again. So what's the takeaway? You are not invisible. Not because someone rich might see you, not because a moment might change your life, but because kindness matters, because you matter, and because sometimes when you least expect it, life doesn't just hand you a new chapter, it hands you the whole damn book. They met in a storm. They loved in stillness. And in a world full of pretending, they chose to be real. If this story moved you, subscribe to John's Stories for more powerful love stories that remind us what it means to be human. New voiceover dramas every week. Don't miss out.